Rand Paul is one of those politicians I enjoy listening to when he sits on a committee. Listen to him tear into an EEOC bureaucrat about the un-American practices they have been doing to innocent Americans.
Big the power, or how enormous the power would be if we were going to have a government that initiates police action where there are no complaints. I mean, there basically would be no limit to where you could look. And so I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I think of sort of we're going to have the police selling illegal cigarettes, trying to get people to buy them. Or, the thing is I imagine you're going into a business where there's been no complaint, and you're like, you interview someone, you don't get what you need, so you keep asking another question, another question, another question. You finally get to a question where the guy says, oh yeah, I'm tired of old people, coming in here. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, now we can do something. Do you realize the downside of the unlimited nature of going after people with no complaint, and that what this is going to do to business? And I mean, do you not understand that we've got to somehow balance that we want people to have jobs? You're going after law-abiding people where there's been no complaint and you don't feel at all any compunction or guilt over what you're doing. I mean, how can you show up to work? How can you show up to work with a straight face and prosecute people where there's been no complaint? How can you do this? I don't understand how you wouldn't resign immediately and say this is abhorrent. This is so against what everything America stands for that you would go after people where there's been absolutely no complaint, run them through the ringer, and use the threat of your bully nature of your office to punish business, and as a consequence, punish their workers.
Well,
I don't get it.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, Senator, my mother owned a shoe store for 15 years, and so that's the family I grew up in. So I understand the challenges of a small business owner.
Ask her how she would feel if you came into her business and started harassing her over her hires.
Secondly, let me just again answer your question with respect to the structure of the agency. I take the cases that are recommended to me from the investigation. I am not in charge of the investigations.
All right,
okay?
Let's say you were. Let's say you were in charge of EEOC and you could make policy. Do you think this policy of entrapment, of going into businesses that have committed no crime and have had no complaint and ginning up and looking for something, isn't that abhorrent? If you were in charge, would you fix it? If you weren't told by anybody, would you commit this crime of entrapment on people? Would you do things differently if you could make the policy?
I disagree that what the Commission is doing is entrapment. And let me just give you an example.
Most agree with the policy then, so don't defer to someone else. You agree with the policy.
Let me give you an example. Most individuals who are discriminated against in the hiring process do not know that they've been discriminated against because employers usually do not say that they've been discriminated against.
We're going after mythology then. You have no idea. No, the people who've been discriminated against don't know it, and the people who've done it don't know it, and you're going to come in as the arbiter of thought, and you are going to decide what's correct. Realize there's a penalty. We have an enormous amount of unemployment, millions of people unemployed. You think you're helping employment or hurting employment?
Let me just say that the Commission in 2006 in the Systemic Task Force report said that the use of directed charges and commissioner's charges, both authorized under the statute, are important tools of the Commission.
Baseless charges.
I didn't say baseless.
Well, baseless would be without complaint. You have no base until you go snooping around looking for a problem that no one complained about. You agree with this policy then?
I agree. In some instances, you have victims of discrimination who are intimidated to come forward.
I just can't imagine that if we were to talk to real people in the real world, they couldn't imagine that you would go after businesses where people don't know they've been discriminated against. There's been no complaint of this. And you would go after and persecute these businesses, put them through hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees. You realize there are jobs lost in the process. You realize if a business is teetering, whether they survive or not survive, that you can bankrupt a business through the bully nature of your pulpit. You have 70,000 backlogs. Why don't you fix your backlog before you decide to go out and persecute American businesses? For goodness sakes, how do you explain your backlog? You have 70,000 things waiting where people actually had a complaint. A real, maybe valid, maybe not, but at least a complaint. And you're going to go looking for things in businesses that have no complaints. I think it's absolutely inexcusable. I think it's un-American. I think it's dishonorable. I can go on and on and on. I hope you will rethink your position on these things. It is something that we should eliminate, and I'll do everything in my possibility to make sure you're not allowed to do it anymore.